All right. So
Sure.
now
Yes.
let's start it. All right. So Ganesh, uh, so much to cover, during this time of COVID, and we always start with some type of empathy. And for
Mhm.
me, um, it's been a tough year, and understanding um, how to use time and understanding the impact of self-isolation. I'd love to understand from you, as we talk about this on the data standard, what has the year been like for you? How have you been able to get yourself out of bed?
Sure. So, yeah, like you said, this was a tough year, but also this gave quite a lot of opportunities to solve some of the new emerging problems,
Yeah.
not just technically, but also on the human side of things. So, when we went into full lockdown last year, March, in New Zealand, it was a very new feel for everyone. How do we continue working? How do we take care of the family? How does the economy sustain? There's so many things that are happening in our minds. And from a work-life perspective, so I'm working for a health and safety regulator in New Zealand, and we take care of health and safety of workers in New Zealand. So COVID is a thing that's going to affect the health and safety issues. So we were quite involved even during the lockdown, and the purpose that why we are here was driving, and it was giving motivation to work towards solving that problems. How do we make a step change for the citizens of New Zealand? So when they go back to work, they can be supported by different means to overcome these issues. On the other side, working for the project from home was full time, was a very different feel, because it was very subjective, right? People from different ages had different issues. People with young kids who cannot go to school means they need higher level of flexibility. I think that's where the empathization comes into play. It became more and more subjective, while previously working from home was only about flexibility and achieving the objective. This one became more and more subjective, and people came up with their own plans of what's best for them, how they can best deliver something given the situation at home. So we have to tweak and play with different options here. So I think it worked reasonably well for the majority of people in the team and the projects. An overview. uh, yeah, so the organization needs to step in, looking at ergonomics, looking at mentally well-being. All those things also played an important role in that sense.
Those are really interesting thought points, and meaningful, because what I like about that is, even though we are in different countries, in different sectors, I think I too approached it the same way, and I love the way you framed it. And I look back on it, and I believe I am living my better self. Sometimes I think my best self, because
Mhm.
I've been able to take this time and think through how I want to be present and the projects I want to work on. Have you been a little bit more thoughtful in the projects you take part of? Are you being a little bit more thoughtful on how you spend your time coming out of COVID, coming out of the isolation?
Yes, I am. So when I talk about projects, during this current scenarios, majority of projects are diverted towards this COVID ecosystem, whatever is caused due to COVID. So to give an example, so previously people gathering is not a problem. Right now, from a health and safety spread model perspective, we want to work on how things might spread and where things might spread. So we want to focus our analytical models, to help out that space, which might not be a project in the previous scenarios, because that's quite common. So looking at the current state, there's an emergence happening. What's good and what's bad is getting very contextual, depending on how the virus spreads out. And the most important thing is the purpose, like I say, can we make a difference? And if we can, then the projects are definitely diverted towards solving that particular issue at hand, to make the one step change difference in the environment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, as far as getting back, now that's maybe there's some more let's call it vaccines and vaccinations and getting back to the office. What do you see happening in the next 6 months? Are you staying remote? Are you going back in the office? Are you going to start internationally traveling? Walk me through how you're thinking about your business travel.
Sure. In New Zealand, we were at level 1, which we call level 1 is we don't have any cases in New Zealand. Everything is being stopped at the border. So we went back to almost normal sometime last year, and it was like that. And we also had some intermittent lockdowns just to make sure the spread is covered. So I think that the change from completely working from home, completely isolated to office environment, what it has created is it has created the need for better digital ecosystem, not just for high-end companies, but for every citizens. So the importance of digital connectivity has been stressed out throughout this lockdown. So how do we connect each and every people in the country, and what's the importance of them having accessibility for resources has been of importance, during this phase. And in terms of international travel, it's still a bit tricky. From an organizational perspective, it's still being considered how that might happen. While New Zealand might be in a better position, but still it's a risk to travel to other countries. So that is not still quite common yet.
Funny, I've been starting to travel in the United States. I'm not yet comfortable going international for many reasons. Regarding like number of days on the trip and how you have to quarantine before. I am vaccinated, 2 shots on Pfizer. I started to do some business travel this past week, and I met about 10 to 12 people all on business trips. We didn't meet in anybody's office. We met at a coffee shop for breakfast. Right. We met at a coffee shop for lunch.
Right, yeah.
At a coffee shop. And what was so surreal is a few of the times we had meetings and people were showing up in shorts and golf shirts. So what was interesting was how casual the meeting has become as well. And it was refreshing to be in that situation, but also a bit surreal. So I love that you're wearing a sport jacket, but to me, it seemed like there are a lot of people I've been speaking with, they weren't even wearing jeans. They were all wearing shorts. So I think it's an interesting point of my life, seeing business getting done this way.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so I do presentation at some of the international conferences, and the way the conferences work has changed tremendously. Previously you have this, you travel to international place and you go to the conference, you have multiple streams, but everything's happening digitally, and you don't have one conference anymore. You have like one for US time zone, one for Australian time zone. So they're replicating the conferences for people to come in and be participating. Yep. And it's getting to a different stage.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because September, October is usually when they have the big conventions. You have IBM, you have Oracle, Salesforce.
Yeah.
And you're right. Now you're trying to chase time zones where they're trying to do it 3 days. Every day starts at 9 o'clock, so you can be very sensitive to your region, to your time zone. I love the fact that we don't have to travel as much anymore. I think that's a positive. I'm still not sure where the serendipitous.
Sure.
I'm just alone at the bar catching up on email, and then you and I just sit next to each other. Next thing you know, we're talking to each other, and next thing you know, we could be a customer of each other's. Yeah. There is that, because we know we've been at those shows where you're literally just sitting at the bar catching up on emails.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's people that end up never going to sessions because all they're doing is working. So I'm torn. But traveling for 5 days, I was rusty. I even left my iPad at the TSA counter. I just was speaking on this call with TSA to get talking about being rusty. We've traveled before. I was putting my shoes on. I'm just an idiot. And then I walked away with my bag. And then when I got home, I was like, my bag just feels lighter.
Yeah.
Right. And the TSA has got their act together. I mean, I called them, I emailed them, and they literally have my credit card. I was just, as we were talking about paying for the shipping, it's a different world. I left my stuff at TSA.
Hope it's safe.
Right. And I mean, we're talking about people who've traveled before. I'm rusty. And then the other thing I've noticed also, as you're talking about trade shows and shows, or that in the United States at the airport, TSA, they're not running all of their metal detectors, so the lines are incredible. Delta is not running full teams, so what you and I the ability to go an hour before the flight, because we can run through metal detector, just doesn't exist anymore. There's just not enough people on the other side of TSA moving you through, so it's unnerving. I was surprised by that. Have you done any local travel, airline?
Yeah. Yes. I did quite a bit of local traveling once we came out of the main lockdown. I felt the same things. Some of the destination doesn't have flights, so the flights has been cancelled. So only the major cities are being connected. Some of the airlines have stopped major schedules. So it's all restricted. It's so confined to particular times of travels. So the airline wants to keep it very tight, so every flight can be full for them instead of spreading it out over the day. The airports are looking a bit different, and if you got 10 coffee shops, you have only 2 or 3 operating. So so it's a different feel when you walk in. And other thing I've noticed is the closing down of all those international duty-free shops. They're being closed down as well, which is a bit of a sad thing to see. They still got everything in there, but they're just locked for months and months. So it's a surreal feel when you walk into the airport these days.
I'm glad you said that, because I felt a tension in the sense that it was nice to go through an airport and have it be relatively quiet, people-wise. That was nice. But in those critical points of TSA, that's where I saw everybody. Then when you get through metal, you're right. It's different. It is quiet. There were, I was at shops that were just closed, and it was 3:00 in the afternoon. It wasn't a midnight. You and I, we didn't get in at midnight. You and I didn't get in at 7 a.m. This, I would say, is a high traffic time. John F. Kennedy Airport, JFK, at 3:00.
Right.
Sad, right? And but the plane was busy, so it was surreal on those cases, and taken for granted how we used to travel through Clear and through TSA. But again, it was just different. What I'm excited is that people are traveling again. What I was excited was to be back on the road. But the other thing, I don't know if you felt this, is my recovery time now was a little bit longer. So now I'm back, and it took me an extra day. I'm used to eating specific meals 3 times a day because we're home. I'm used to, now you're back on the road after 18 months. I mean, it took me a while. What about you? Did you feel like when you got home, your body was just like, what are you doing? But you used to live that way.
Yeah. So during lockdown, I have very, very different schedule. So every couple of hours, I try to put in something active into my schedule.
Okay,
at around 11, go for a walk. Around 3, go to the gym. Having that smaller breaks, pushed me a bit. I don't feel like I'm alone. And even in lockdown, we were allowed to go for walks in New Zealand around where you live and stuff. So you meet people, but you have to physically distance like 2 meters from them, but still it's good to see someone else walking alongside you. So those give a bit of a refreshing stuff. Food wise, with all the restaurants closed down, I have to cook all 3 meals. We have to cook all 3 meals at home. So that was a different experience, just to realize how much we don't know. So learning about cooking and trying to survive with all the homemade meals throughout for 3-4 months was an interesting thing.
And I mean, in bringing us back full circle, what's amazing is you and I are the adults, and we're trying to get our act together and at the same time mentor our direct reports. And we're trying to say we've got it under control, and sometimes we don't. How has it been leading a team? How has it been really keeping everyone calm? Have you learned things about yourself that maybe you didn't realize, or maybe some skills you learned earlier that you now have to lean on as you had to teach and keep the team motivated and focused and healthy and positive? What did you learn?
I think the main thing I learned is to trust people on these situations. So it's no more about deadlines that the project comes up with. It's about trusting the person to see what you can do given the situation for us. Then they are motivated. As the trust increased between the leadership team and the people in the team, I think that we can find a common ground. They want to contribute the best they can in the given situation, and the organization can reap out instead of trying to push the boundaries at that point in time. To be honest, we didn't have any project failures. We kept on rolling throughout the phase. Maybe it's a slow baby step kind of things in certain projects, but I think the progress was clean and clear. Everyone happy. I think the trust was the key thing between us.
I love what you said. Trust the person, not the deadline. I like that. That's a t-shirt. Trust the person, not the deadline. Because they'll hit the deadline. And I liked how you framed that. That's an adult line. Trust the person, not the deadline. Right. And I think that's the gold here. So I appreciate you sharing that. Thanks for being on the show, man. This, to me, it helps me break up the loneliness. We're still not in a big travel mode locally. So to me, meeting a new friend in a different country, in a different continent, place that I have never been, but now when I go there, I know I've got a friend. So I appreciate you being on the show. We are the Data Standard, or sponsored by Pandio ML. Ganesh, thanks again for being here. Is there anything you want to plug before we wind it down? Do you want to plug how to get in touch with your firm? Do you want to plug any of the new tech? Is there anything you want to focus on?
Sure. Thank you, Darren and Data Standard, for the opportunity. So if someone wants to get in touch with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'm quite open to discuss about analytics, AI, data practices, and strategy kind of things. So I'm quite community focused. So it doesn't have to be formal conversation. So I'm quite happy with informal chats every now and then between the community. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. No, this was fun. And we're going to keep in touch. And there'll be a few people I'll connect you with, because I think you're right. It's about building the networking community. So thank you for being here. And if I get there, I'm definitely going to look you up, and I want to go see some of those lambs. So this is a treat.
Sure, will do. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you. Be safe.
Bye.